All right, so this is the first presentation for Unit 1, and in Unit 1 we're going to cover ancient history. So basically from the beginning of civilization all the way up through the early empires like the Persians and Syrians and things like that. So we're going to cover pretty much what it would be considered Chapter 1 in the book. We do have a textbook, it's online. And I kind of follow it to an extent, so there'll be some things in the book that I may not talk about in class, and there'll be other things I do talk about, so I kind of skip around some. But you can definitely use the book as a resource for your vocabulary and then also for extra reading. If you don't quite catch something we talk about in class or don't understand it, you can definitely look at the book. It's kind of the first resource to go to. So we'll cover pretty much what's in Chapter 1 of the book, linking the beginning of human history. But before we actually get into the beginning of human history, you need to make sure you know what primary and secondary sources are. So in studying history, you have to remember that history isn't just a bunch of facts. And actually, a lot of it is just educated guesses that we make based on the information we find. And so that's, through primary and secondary sources that we collect together, and think of it like an investigation. So you get all these pieces of evidence, you put it together, and you try to create a picture of what the world was like at that particular time. And so in doing that, historians have to be able to verify, what are primary and secondary sources, because that's going to tell the difference between what we can really rely on and what is something that we kind of have to take with a grain of salt. It may be true, it may not be, that kind of thing. So a primary source is written or created by people who lived during the time of the historical event, and more importantly, they experienced it, they saw it. So 9/11, for example, I was alive when 9/11 happened, and I saw it on TV. But a primary source is going to be more so from somebody that was like in New York City and saw the planes hit the World Trade Center. And that's going to be a primary source. So more of an eyewitness to it as well. Now you could argue, of course, in today's age, if I saw it on TV, if that would be considered a primary source or not. But I would argue secondary in that case. And so primary source is that's the main thing you want. So if you're trying to form an argument, if you're trying to write a persuasive essay or win a debate, you need to find as many primary sources to back up your arguments as you can. So basically, like if you were to create some kind of argument for a particular idea, at least your top 3 points need to be from primary sources. You need to find them from people that actually saw the event happen, that experienced it, and can write about it. But of course, too, we have to remember that eyewitness accounts vary usually quite a bit. And so you still can't just take whatever someone wrote that was there and say it was the absolute truth. All right, and then secondary sources are written by people after the event occurred, and they use primary sources for information to write the secondary source. So this would be like if I wrote a book about the Holocaust. Well, I didn't live through the Holocaust, but I could go out there and find people that survived the Holocaust, that lived through it, that are still alive. There's still some. And I could interview them and then write a book based on those interviews, or create a documentary. So like later on in this class, we'll watch a documentary by Steven Spielberg called The Last Days. And Steven Spielberg interviewed, well, not him personally, but through this organization he created, interviewed about 10 or 15,000 survivors of the Holocaust. And so that's a secondary source, but it's a rich secondary source because it's full of firsthand accounts. And so the secondary source would be, taking those accounts and making something of it, and like me writing about it. But of course, the video itself, the actual interview of that person that survived the Holocaust, would be a primary source. So that's basically differences, and you'll need to know these going forward in this class. As I have you write essays and back up your opinions and stuff like that, you'll need to be able to tell me, which sources you use, were they primary or secondary, things like that. And you need to use as many primary as possible. And not that secondary are bad, it's just primary generally more reliable. All right, so now getting into the history. So prehistory, this is the time before the invention of writing. So from this time period of history, obviously we don't have writing to go off of. We don't have anything to read. So we need basically 3 different professions that come together to help us give us a picture of the prehistory time period. So this would be archaeologists, anthropologists, and paleontologists. So an archaeologist, as you probably already know, they dig up the bones, they dig up the stuff out of the ground. The paleontologist mainly focuses on bones themselves and putting them together and things like that and studying them. Like, for example, looking at teeth, we can tell what a human ate based on their teeth and what's in them. And also in their bones as well. So we can pick up on the kind of climate they lived in based on their teeth, the kind of food they ate, how old they were when they died, what they died from, all that kind of stuff. And once we get enough of a sample from a certain time period, we can start kind of getting a general idea of what life was like for humans at that time. Then anthropologists, they take what the archaeologist digs out of the ground, and they also take the information the paleontologist has given them about diet and climate and all that kind of stuff. And they put that together, and they're the ones that kind of create a picture of that society. So they're the ones that can tell us what that culture was like. So like Stonehenge, for example, it's the anthropologist is going to take all the information we found in the ground around there to kind of put a picture together of why Stonehenge was built. And things of that sort. So they kind of give us an insight into that particular culture. All right, so you got the Old Stone Age, the Paleolithic Age. During this time, most humans were hunting and gathering. So they were in small bands of people running around, chasing food and stuff like that. They did invent tools during this time period. Also, fire and language developed as well. And this is mainly during the Ice Age for the most part. So human population was tiny, maybe 1 million people worldwide. Hunting groups of usually 15 or 20 people, somewhere in that range. And then you get to the New Stone Age, which is called the Neolithic Age. And this is where you start getting polished stone tools, they start making pottery, they start growing crops and domesticating animals. So this is a huge shift, going from hunting and gathering to food producing. So going from roaming around the earth to settling down. And most of this lesson is about that, about the Neolithic revolution that occurred in people settling down. So basically, humans are trying to control nature at this point. So during the Old Stone Age, humans are just subject to nature. There's no trying to really control it, or I say control it, I mean, like trying to survive it and stuff like that. And they were just nomads. And then, of course, all the tools they had during that time mostly had to do with getting food. So they're not doing anything else. I mean, really, the life of a nomad during the Old Stone Age is wake up every day, what am I going to eat, where am I going to get water? And that's it. It was a pretty, you could say, boring life. Really, that was their focus. They actually didn't have to work that hard. Obviously, it was hard work killing an animal, but, you're looking at maybe 15 hours of work throughout the week, instead of the kind of hours we work now. So it was actually a little bit more relaxing, probably, than our lifestyle. So you get to the Neolithic Revolution. So the whole idea of this is this shift from hunting and gathering to food producing. And this is considered the biggest revolution in all of human history, this shift. And keep in mind, a revolution isn't necessarily a war. It's just a new idea, basically, a shift in the way people live. And this changed everything. So, of course, the first question is why did it happen? And keep in mind, this didn't happen all over the earth at the same time. This happened over a period of thousands of years in different areas at different times. So as far as why it happened, we don't know for sure, but we can make some educated guesses. One would be changes in climate. Basically, the Paleolithic time period was mainly during the Ice Age. So as the Ice Age ended, the earth warmed up, and then there was ability to grow crops. And then increase in population. As the population increases, you can't support that just based on hunting and gathering. You have to be able to produce food. And so that was most likely the other reason. And it could have just been they got tired of hunting. Like you start seeing certain things grow in the area you're in, and I'm sure people just thought, I wonder if there's a way that we could control this, basically, to be able to take this and make this grow and make a lot of it to where we don't have to keep moving around all the time and hunting these animals. All right, so with farming, we see the advent of a couple of things. One is slash and burn farming. So they started, cutting down trees and stuff like that. And of course, they had to make tools to be able to do that, stronger tools than they had before. And they started burning down the area, and that puts the nutrients in the soil so they could begin to farm. And then soon after farming, if not pretty much at the same time, they started domesticating animals. This is mainly for food and of course, to help them working on the farm. And so, which animals do you think were domesticated first? I mean, obviously, it's going to be the animals that help them the most. So in some cases, dogs, because it helps, with hunting and things like that. But it really just depends on the region you're talking about. So like in the Middle East, for example, the first animals to be domesticated were sheep and goats. Think about like with sheep, for example, the wool they provide, for clothing. So clothing's going to get a lot better. Goats can provide work, but also milk, and of course you can eat both of those. And then in China, pigs were the first ones to be domesticated. Reindeer up north in Eurasia, so like Siberia, that region. Llamas in South America, like Peru, which is why llamas are still a big deal there. And then now you get to the consequences of sedentism and agriculture. So the consequences of settling down and staying in one spot. So, this is where you're going to start getting to kind of things we have now as far as class division and things like that. And really these terms of standard of living and quality of life. Like, I mean, in the Paleolithic age, they're not going to have that. Like, everyone lives pretty much the same way. There's not going to be social classes or any division among the people whatsoever. So, there's definitely some amazing positives for settling down, but the negatives are also big too. Creating class division, things like that, to where now people are starting to be divided based on the things they have or maybe the way they look, the clothes they can afford, and things like that. All right, so this leads to the beginning of civilization. It's key to understand how this would create civilization. So beforehand, when people are roaming around, civilization isn't going to be created because people are constantly moving, and there's just not a big population. So once people settle down, well, eventually you're going to have a collection of people. It's going to become this community. Well, then you're going to have to set up rules because let's say someone steals someone else's crop, some of it or something like that, or steals a wagon or whatever. Well, then there needs to be some kind of punishment for that. Well, where's that going to come from? So now you need a government. Well, then you need laws to say that, well, that's wrong, and then you need punishments for that and those kind of things. And so you need all these systems in place to be able to kind of control civilization. So, farming leads to villages. This is going to create the need for government and laws and things like that. And then also for people to do other things as well, other types of skilled work. And so they had to build irrigation systems and things like that. So doing that, and now you have a bunch of food coming in. Now you have food surpluses. So now not everyone needs to farm. Some people can go and learn something else, like how to make pottery. And this led to other inventions like the wheel and the sail. And think about what that's really for. I mean, that's going to be for trade at this point. Because then they realize, okay, in this village, we have all these resources, but we're missing this, this, and this. Oh, well, that village down the river, they have those things. And we have these things that they don't have. So we can give them these things, and then we can get those things we need. And you have the beginning of trade. So that brings about the wheel and the sail. I mean, basically, when it comes to human invention, there's a saying that says that necessity is the mother of invention. So basically, that humans will invent something when we need it. So if we need something to survive, if we need something for our society to take a step forward, we're going to invent it. Like, someone's going to come up with it. And in this case, the first thing is the wheel and the sail. We need to trade. We need to get there. We need to do it fast. And so that's what they invent. And then, of course, like I said, beginning of trade at that point. And so, of course, that's going to bring in money and the division of people as far as, the wealth and what they have. And then social changes. You're going to start seeing religions develop. At this point, they're mainly going to be polytheistic, so they believe in many gods and goddesses. And the main focus is going to be nature and animal spirits. So, like, worshiping the sun, the moon, the rivers especially, so basically water, things like that. And they're going to rely on those basically to help them. And, because farming is a scary thing because, think about it. If a famine comes through, like there's a drought or something like that, you can't feed your people. At least with hunting and gathering, you can follow the herd. You can't follow the herd here. It's just if your crop doesn't come in, you starve. And so not only did they, rely on worshiping these nature spirits to help make sure the crops came in, but they also had to create a system in which to store extra resources. So that way during famine and things like that, they had a way to feed their people. And so, like this building, for example, this is a ziggurat, which is an early building, one of the first cities on earth called Ur. And this is a temple where people would come and sacrifice to the gods to try to make sure that basically the crops would come in. But it was also a place where they would store things, store extra grain and things like that for the people as well. And then this is, if you miss class, this is the assignment you need to do that's on Google Classroom. Oh, let me go back to it. Was farming a good idea? So just follow these directions basically, and then the directions on Google Classroom, and do that assignment if you miss class. All right, and then getting to the characteristics of a civilization. So this is the 5 characteristics of civilization. This applies to every civilization from the beginning of time till today. It's the same thing. So first one's advanced cities. So cities that obviously have business sector. They employ a bunch of different people, which means they're going to have specialized workers. A specialized worker, someone that's skilled in a particular trade. Things like that. So obviously not just a farmer, someone that can, like an artisan or something that can produce something specific. Complex institutions, this is going to be like religion, education system, government, things like that. So systems or institutions that kind of control society. And I say control society, at least put parameters on how to behave and stuff like that, and also ways in which to educate their people. Because, like, for example, you can't have specialized workers without an education system. It's not going to happen. So all this has to be working together. And then record keeping. People back then, of course, kept record of wars, the weather, rulers, and stuff like that, which is very similar to the kind of records we keep today. We do the exact same thing. And then advanced technology. Now, keep in mind, technology, when you hear that word, most people today think of, something like our phones or computer, something like that. But technology is just simply a tool that can be used to make something that humans do easier. So a hammer is a form of technology. A screwdriver is technology. Anything that we manipulate and create to help make what we do easier is technology. So advanced technology back then, could have been the wheel and the sail and, things like that. And whereas in today, it's an iPhone. But still the same idea. It's advanced technology that helps make our lives easier somehow and makes us more efficient at our work. All right, so that's it for this one. Also, there was a assignment on Google Classroom over the characteristics of civilization. So if you missed class on the day that we went over this, then you need to check Google Classroom for that assignment.